Jack Thompson stood among the dusty scaffolding and clattering tools of the construction site, his hands rough and calloused from years of labor. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the half-finished building that loomed before him. It was a typical Wednesday afternoon, and the rhythmic sound of hammers and the murmur of his colleagues filled the air, creating a comforting backdrop to their daily grind. "Hey, Jack, what would you do if you won the lottery?" his friend Mike called out, a teasing grin spreading across his face as he wiped sweat from his brow. The group paused, their attention turning to Jack as they leaned against the steel beams, intrigued by the question. Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "I'd probably just buy a bigger truck and maybe take Sarah on that vacation we've been talking about," he replied, feigning nonchalance. He knew the kind of dreams that floated around the site like dust in the wind, dreams of a life free from financial worry, of lavish homes and spontaneous adventures. "Come on, man, $10 million, you could do anything." Tommy Reed, Jack's best friend, chimed in, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I'd buy a house on the beach, a boat, and live like a king." "Yeah, right," Jack laughed, but inside he felt a flicker of something deeper, a yearning for freedom, for the life he often imagined but never dared to pursue. "But I'd still have to work. I can't just sit around all day." "Why not?" Mike shot back, a smirk on his face. "You'd be set for life. Just think about it, not having to wake up at the crack of dawn to swing a hammer." As the banter continued, Jack allowed himself to daydream, envisioning what it might be like to be unfettered by bills and responsibilities. But just as quickly, the weight of reality pressed back down on him. He glanced at the clock on the wall, the hands ticking away, reminding him that the day was far from over. Later that evening, after a long day at work, Jack found himself at the local convenience store. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he wandered the aisles, his mind still replaying the conversation from earlier. In a moment of spontaneity, he approached the lottery ticket stand. The colorful array of scratch-offs gleamed enticingly, but it was the Powerball tickets that drew him in. He felt an impulse, a flutter of excitement that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Just one," he muttered to himself, pulling out a crumpled $10 bill from his pocket. "What's the worst that could happen?" With the ticket secured, he tucked it into his wallet, dismissing the thought of it again as he headed home to Sarah. As he entered their small but cozy house, the familiar scents of dinner greeted him. Sarah was in the kitchen, her hair tied back, as she stirred a pot of pasta. She turned, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Hey, honey, how was work?" she asked, a smile curling her lips. Same old, Jack replied, forcing a smile as he hung his jacket on the hook by the door. He tried to focus on her, on the warmth of their shared life, but in the back of his mind, the lottery ticket simmered, a secret waiting to unfold. The next morning, Jack awoke earlier than usual. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room in a gentle glow. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, the weight of his decision heavy upon him. Finally, he swung his legs over the side of the bed and reached for his phone. With shaking hands, he opened the lottery app and scanned the winning numbers from the previous night. It felt surreal as he matched the numbers one by one. "No way," he whispered, disbelief washing over him like a wave. He checked again and again, but the reality remained unchanged. He had won $10 million. Overwhelmed, Jack's heart raced. His mind spun with possibilities, dreams of escape, of living a life he never thought he could have. But alongside that thrill, a darker fear crept in. He thought of Sarah, of their life together, and the potential fallout if she ever found out. The idea of divorce loomed like a shadow, a threat that could strip him of everything, including this newfound fortune. He decided, in that moment, that he would keep the win a secret, just until he figured everything out. He would manage it, he told himself. He could enjoy the benefits of this life-altering win without letting it disrupt their seemingly perfect marriage. After all, he reasoned, it was just money, and money had a way of complicating things. For the next few days, Jack slipped into a double life. He continued his routine at work, laughing with his colleagues about mundane topics, all while a secret smile lingered on his lips. He made small expenditures, new tools for work, a few items for the house that he had been putting off for years. Each purchase felt like a thrill, a taste of the wealth that was now his. One afternoon he found himself at a car dealership, staring at a shiny new truck that gleamed under the bright lights. The salesman approached him, eyes sparkling with eagerness. "This beauty could be all yours today." Jack hesitated, his heart pounding with excitement and guilt. "I'm just looking for now," he replied, trying to keep his composure. "Take it for a test drive. You won't regret it," the salesman urged, and before he knew it, Jack found himself behind the wheel, the engine purring beneath him like a content cat. As he drove through the streets, the rush of adrenaline coursed through him. He felt alive, empowered. But as he pulled back into the dealership lot, a nagging thought crept in. This wasn't who he was. He was just Jack, the hard-working construction worker with a devoted wife. He couldn't let this new identity consume him. When he returned home, the sight of Sarah in their modest kitchen brought him back to reality. She looked up from chopping vegetables, her brow furrowed in concern. "You're home late. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just got caught up with some guys," he lied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He felt the tension in his chest tighten as he watched her. "Okay, well, dinner is almost ready," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "I made your favorite." "Thanks, babe," he replied as he took a seat at the table. But his mind was elsewhere, racing with the thrill of his secret life. As the days turned into weeks, Jack became adept at balancing his two worlds. He would come home, share stories about work, and enjoy quiet evenings with Sarah, all while the weight of his deception grew heavier. The new truck sat in the driveway, a constant reminder of his hidden life, and each time he turned the key in the ignition, he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. One evening, as they settled down on the couch to watch television, Sarah curled up against him, her warmth a stark contrast to the coldness of his secret. "You know, I've been thinking," she began, her voice tentative. "What if we took a trip, just the two of us? We could use some time away." Jack's heart raced at the thought. "That sounds great," he said, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. "Where were you thinking?" "Maybe the coast. Just a weekend getaway," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Let's do it," he replied, his mind already racing ahead. A weekend on the coast could be the perfect cover for him to figure out how to handle the money without her suspecting anything. As Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, Jack felt a pang of guilt. The secret was becoming harder to bear, and he knew that if he wasn't careful, it could destroy everything they had built together. But for now, he could pretend, and perhaps that would be enough. Jack sat on the edge of their bed, the weight of his secrets pressing down on him like a ton of bricks. He could hear Sarah bustling around in the kitchen, humming a tune that used to make him smile. But today, it only filled him with dread. The lottery winnings had transformed his life into a tangled web of lies, each thread pulling tighter with every passing day. "Jack, are you coming for dinner?" Sarah called out, her voice cheerful and inviting. She had been planning a surprise anniversary dinner, something special to celebrate their years together. Yet, with each day that passed, the fear of being discovered gnawed at him. "Yeah, just give me a minute," he replied, trying to infuse his voice with enthusiasm he didn't feel. He stood up and looked in the mirror, running a hand through his hair. The man looking back at him seemed more like a stranger than ever, a man caught between two worlds, one of hard work and authenticity, the other of deception and luxury. As he walked to the kitchen, he noticed Sarah setting the table with their best dishes. The soft glow of candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. She looked radiant, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, her smile brightening the room. But he knew he was hiding something monumental from her, and that made the sight bittersweet. "Wow, this looks amazing," Jack said, forcing a smile as he took a seat at the table. "Only the best for my husband," Sarah replied, her eyes sparkling with love and anticipation. "I wanted to make tonight special since we haven't had a chance to celebrate properly in a while." Jack's stomach twisted. He had thought about confessing more than once, about coming clean and sharing the incredible news. But fear held him back. What if she left him? What if she took half of his newfound wealth? The thought of losing everything he had just gained was unbearable. "Thanks, honey. It all looks great," he said, his throat tightening as he reached for the wine. He poured himself a glass, hoping it would ease his anxiety. As they ate, Sarah chatted about her day, sharing stories from work and asking about his. Jack nodded along, providing half-hearted responses, his mind racing with thoughts of his secret life. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching him closely, her eyes searching for something beyond his practiced smile. "Jack, is everything okay?" Sarah asked suddenly, her brow furrowing. "You seem distant." He stiffened, setting down his fork. "I'm fine, really. Just a lot on my mind, I guess." He avoided her gaze, focusing instead on the flickering candle in the center of the table. "Are you sure? Because you've been acting a bit strange lately," she pressed, concern etched on her face. "If something's bothering you, you can tell me. We're a team, remember?" Her words pierced him. They had always been a team, united against life's challenges. But now he felt like an imposter in his own home. "It's just work. You know how it gets," he said, hoping to deflect her concern. "Right." She nodded slowly, though her expression betrayed lingering doubt. "Just promise me you'll talk to me if anything's wrong. I hate feeling like there's something you're not telling me." "I promise," he replied, but even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. Later that evening, after the dishes were cleaned and the candles extinguished, Jack found himself sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. Sarah curled up next to him, her head resting on his shoulder. The warmth of her presence felt comforting yet suffocating at the same time. He yearned to be honest, but the thought of laying bare his secret was terrifying. "Jack," she said softly, breaking the silence. "What do you think about taking a little vacation? Just the two of us? I think we deserve it. We could go somewhere warm, maybe the beach." He felt a pang of guilt. She had no idea how easy it would be for him to book an extravagant trip. He could afford a lavish getaway, a far cry from their usual budget. But the thought of spending that money without her knowing filled him with dread. "I don't know, Sarah. Things are busy at work, and I just don't want to leave everyone in a bind." "Come on, we could use the break," she urged, sitting up to look him in the eyes. "I know you've been working hard, and I appreciate it. But life is too short, Jack. We need to enjoy it while we can." He wanted to agree, to share a little slice of his fortune with her, but the fear of discovery loomed large. "Maybe we can plan something for later in the year," he suggested, deflecting again. "Later," she echoed, disappointment creeping into her voice. "I don't want to wait, Jack. I want to celebrate us now while we still can." Jack's heart raced. The more she pushed, the more he felt cornered. "I'll think about it," he finally said, trying to sound nonchalant. But inside, he was in turmoil. The next day, Jack met Tommy for lunch at their favorite diner. As they sat in a booth, The smell of greasy fries and burgers filled the air. Jack picked at his food, feeling the weight of his secret as Tommy discussed the latest town gossip. "Have you seen Sarah lately?" Tommy asked, his eyes narrowing. "She seems a bit off. You guys okay?" Jack forced a chuckle, but it sounded strained even to his own ears. "Yeah, we're fine. Just busy, you know." Tommy raised an eyebrow, not buying the facade. "Look, man, you've got to be careful. I mean, I know you've got a lot going on, but keeping secrets like this, it's dangerous. You don't want to lose her." I know," Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "But if I tell her, it could ruin everything. What if she wants half? What if she leaves? Or what if she feels betrayed when she finds out later?" Tommy countered, his tone serious. "You need to come clean. It's only a matter of time before she figures it out." Jack shook his head, panic rising in his chest. "I can't, Tommy. I can't risk it. I'm not ready to lose her." As they finished their meal, Jack's mind was racing with conflicting thoughts. Tommy's words echoed in his ears, and for the first time, he wondered if he was being foolish. He couldn't keep living this double life, but the fear of what would happen if he confessed kept him paralyzed. Back at home that evening, Sarah was in the living room, flipping through a photo album. She looked up as Jack entered, her face lighting up. "Look at this. Remember our trip to the lake? We had so much fun." Jack forced a smile as he sat beside her, but the memories felt like daggers in his heart. Memories of when life was simple, when love didn't come with the burden of lies. "Yeah, good times," he said absently, his mind elsewhere. "Jack, can we talk about something?" Sarah asked hesitantly, closing the album and giving him her full attention. "Sure, what's up?" he replied, bracing himself for another discussion about their relationship, or perhaps her suspicions rising again. I want us to be open with each other," she began, her voice steady but laced with vulnerability. "I know things haven't been perfect, and I can feel that something's off. I just want to know that you're not hiding anything from me." His heart raced. The walls were closing in. "I promise I'm not hiding anything," he said, the words feeling like poison on his tongue. "Then why do I feel like I don't really know you anymore?" she pressed, her eyes searching his. "Maybe it's just the stress of life, Sarah. We're both busy and things change." "Things shouldn't change like this. Not between us," she replied, her voice breaking slightly. Jack felt the guilt wash over him like a tidal wave. "I know. I'm sorry. I really am. I'll do better," he said. But deep down, he knew it was just more empty promises. As she leaned in and kissed him softly, Jack felt the weight of his secret pressing down harder than ever. He was trapped in a cycle of lies, and the only way out was to confront the truth. But as the night wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The evening air was thick with a bittersweet mix of nostalgia and tension as Jack Thompson stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for their anniversary dinner. The dining room was adorned with flickering candles and a bouquet of Sarah's favorite flowers, but his heart wasn't in it. With each passing day, the weight of his secret bore down heavier upon him. He could hardly look at his own reflection without feeling a pang of guilt. "Jack, are you ready?" Sarah's voice echoed from the kitchen, laced with excitement and a hint of impatience. "Yeah, just a sec," he called back, forcing a smile. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the evening ahead. The lottery win, a staggering $10 million, felt more like a curse than a blessing. Keeping it from Sarah was becoming increasingly unbearable, and tonight the facade would be pushed to its limits. As they settled into their car, Sarah glanced at him, her eyes sparkling with love and trust. "I can't believe it's been 5 years already. Time flies, doesn't it?" She reached over and squeezed his hand, a gesture that almost made him melt. "Yeah, it sure does," he replied, keeping his tone light, but inside he was a storm of conflict. They drove through the quiet streets of their small town, illuminated by streetlights that flickered like stars. Each landmark they passed held memories, first dates, late-night drives, and shared dreams, but all he could think about was the wall he was building between them, brick by brick, lie by lie. At the restaurant, the ambience was romantic, with soft music playing in the background and the smell of gourmet dishes wafting through the air. Jack watched as Sarah's eyes widened in delight at the beautiful setting. She had planned this dinner meticulously, excitedly telling him about the special menu and the wine pairing she had chosen. "Jack, this place is amazing! I can't believe we've never come here before," she exclaimed, pulling out her chair with a flourish. "Yeah, it is nice," he muttered, trying to match her enthusiasm, but his mind was elsewhere. He scanned the room, half expecting someone to recognize him, or worse, to somehow know about his secret. He watched as couples around them laughed and shared intimate moments, feeling like an outsider in his own life. As the waiter approached with their menus, Jack forced himself to focus on the present. "What sounds good to you?" he asked, trying to engage Sarah in conversation. "I'm torn between the filet mignon and the lobster tail. What do you think?" She looked at him, her eyes shining with hope that he would make the evening special. "Maybe the filet. It's supposed to be their specialty," he suggested, but his stomach churned as he realized he was far more interested in the steak than in the woman across from him. After ordering, they clinked their glasses of wine together, a ritual that felt increasingly hollow to Jack. "To us," Sarah said, her smile radiant and her eyes alight with affection. "To us," he echoed, but the words felt like ashes in his mouth. As they began to eat, the conversation flowed easily. They reminisced about their wedding day, shared dreams for the future, and even made light-hearted jokes about the challenges of married life. Yet Jack's laughter felt forced. Each chuckle was a reminder of the truth he was withholding. He excused himself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. He stood in front of the sink, splashing cold water on his face, staring at his reflection. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself. "This isn't who I am." Returning to the table, Jack found Sarah staring out the window, lost in thought. He sat down and she turned to him, her expression serious. "Are you okay? You've been a bit distant tonight." "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired from work, I guess," he replied, instantly regretting the excuse. He could see the flicker of concern in her eyes, and it twisted his gut. "Jack, you know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "Of course I do," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "It's just, you know how work is." As the dinner went on, he felt the walls of his deception closing in. The waiter brought out the dessert, chocolate molten lava cake, and Sarah's face lit up again. "This is my favorite. You know me so well," she said, her joy infectious, but it only deepened his internal conflict. He had made a promise to himself to make this anniversary special, yet all he was doing was digging his own grave. As they finished dessert, Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket, a notification from his bank app. He glanced at it, his heart racing. It was a message confirming a large purchase he had made earlier in the day, a luxury item he had convinced himself he deserved. Panic surged through him. He quickly silenced his phone, hoping Sarah hadn't noticed, but she had. "Jack, what was that?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Just work stuff," he lied, forcing a smile. "I'll check it later." With the dinner winding down, Jack felt an overwhelming urge to escape. "Hey, I'm going to step outside for a minute," he said abruptly. "Is everything all right?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Yeah, just need some fresh air," he replied, not waiting for her response. He stepped outside, the cool night air hitting his face like a splash of cold water. He leaned against the wall, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he found Sarah standing there, arms crossed, a determined look on her face. "Jack, what's going on? You've been acting weird all night." He sighed, feeling the pressure of her gaze. "I don't know, Sarah. It's just, everything's been a lot lately." "Is it about work? Because I can help you with that," she urged, stepping closer. "No, it's not work," he admitted, frustration bubbling to the surface. "It's just everything." She reached for his hand, her expression softening. "You're not being honest with me. I can feel it. If there's something you're hiding, please tell me. We're supposed to share everything, remember?" Jack's heart raced. He could feel the walls closing in, the truth clawing at his throat. I just don't want to ruin the evening," he stammered, deflecting. "You already are by keeping secrets from me," she shot back, her voice steady but laced with hurt. He looked into her eyes, searching for the right words to say, but they eluded him. Instead, he took a step back, creating space between them. "I need some time to think," he said, the truth heavy on his tongue but never escaping his lips. "Jack, please don't shut me out," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I'm not shutting you out, I just need space." With that, he turned away, leaving her standing there, confusion and disappointment etched on her face. As he walked back into the restaurant, the weight of what he was carrying felt heavier than ever. The lies, the secrets, and the fear were piling up, and he knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Unbeknownst to him, that moment of separation would be the catalyst for a series of events that would unravel their lives in ways he could never have imagined. Sarah, heartbroken and confused, returned to their table, her mind racing with questions. She picked up her purse, and as she reached for her coat, her fingers brushed against a crumpled receipt tucked away in the pocket of Jack's jacket. Curiosity piqued, she pulled it out, glancing at the date and the amount. Her heart sank as she read the details. It was a receipt for an expensive watch, one that Jack had never mentioned, one that seemed so out of place in their world. "Jack," she whispered to herself, her eyes widening as the pieces began to connect in her mind. Jack Thompson stood in the sleek, high-end electronics store, the faint buzz of excitement thrumming beneath the surface of his composed demeanor. He had just treated himself to a brand new top-of-the-line gaming console, a purchase that felt indulgent yet justified in the shadow of his recent lottery win. The bright lights and polished displays of the store seemed to mock the simple, dusty life he once led as a construction worker. Yet, with each extravagant item he acquired, Jack felt a surge of both pleasure and guilt. He hadn't told Sarah about the money, and with each new possession, he was well aware that he was stepping deeper into a web of lies. "Congratulations on the purchase! This model just flew off the shelves," the young salesman chirped, his enthusiasm infectious. "Thanks," Jack replied, forcing a smile as he mentally calculated how much of his winnings he was willing to spend on himself. "It's just a little something to unwind with after work." "Hey, you deserve it. Hard work should always be rewarded," the salesman said, handing Jack the receipt with a flourish. Jack's heart raced. A little something to unwind with? It felt like an understatement. The lavish lifestyle he was starting to embrace was a far cry from the modest existence he had shared with Sarah. As he left the store, the console tucked under his arm, a wave of unease washed over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was living a double life, and each new purchase was a step further from the man Sarah thought she knew. At home, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Sarah was in the kitchen, her back turned as she prepared dinner. The aroma of sautéed vegetables and grilled chicken filled the air, but Jack found it hard to focus on anything but the weight of his secret. He placed the gaming console in the living room, trying to act casual as he entered the kitchen. "Hey, babe," he said, attempting to sound cheerful. "Hey," Sarah replied, her tone clipped. She didn't turn to face him, and Jack could see the tension in her shoulders. How was work? "Same old, you know," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just busy with the new project." He forced a chuckle, but it fell flat. Sarah finally turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "You've been acting a little strange lately. Everything okay?" "Of course, just tired, I guess," he replied, hoping to deflect her probing gaze. "Long hours and all that?" "Right." She nodded slowly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Well, dinner's almost ready. I thought we could eat early tonight." "Sounds great," Jack replied, but inside he felt a knot tightening in his stomach. He had become a master at deflection, but he knew that Sarah's instincts were sharp. She could sense something amiss. Later that evening, after dinner, Sarah plopped down on the couch next to Jack, a glass of wine in hand. "Have you spoken to Tommy recently?" she asked, her tone casual yet laced with curiosity. "Not really. Why do you ask?" Jack responded, a bit too quickly. "He just seems concerned about you. He mentioned you've been distant. I don't want you to feel like you have to hide things from me." Her eyes bore into his, searching for the truth behind his facade. Jack swallowed hard. "I'm not hiding anything, Sarah. I don't know. I guess I've been preoccupied with work." He hoped his words would quell her unease, but the flicker of doubt in her gaze suggested otherwise. "I just want us to be okay," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "We've been through so much together. I don't want to lose you." Jack felt a pang of guilt. Did she have any idea how much he was risking? How much he stood to lose? He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You won't lose me, I promise." As he lay in bed that night, sleep eluded him. The soft hum of the city outside their window and the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall only amplified his racing thoughts. He thought of the lottery ticket tucked away in the safety deposit box, a secret that felt heavier than any burden he had ever carried. If only Sarah knew the truth, he thought. But the fear of losing everything, his wife, his life as he knew it, held him captive. Across town, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in hand. She had just hung up with her sister Linda. They had shared a long conversation, one that had been both cathartic and troubling. Sarah had confided her growing suspicions about Jack, the change in his demeanor, the little lies that seemed to pile up. Linda, ever the voice of reason, urged Sarah to follow her instincts. "Just talk to him, Sarah. You deserve to know what's going on," Linda had said. "If he's hiding something, it's better to confront it now than let it fester." But confronting Jack felt daunting. Sarah loved him deeply, and the thought of laying bare her fears felt like opening a wound. Yet the more she thought about it, the more she realized she couldn't live in uncertainty. If Jack was keeping something from her, something significant, she needed to know. The following day, Jack was at work, the sun beating down on him as he maneuvered heavy materials with his colleagues. Tommy approached him during a break, his expression serious. "Jack, we need to talk." "What's up?" Jack asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've been hearing things, man," Tommy said, his voice low. "Sarah's worried about you. If you're keeping something from her, it's not going to end well." Jack felt a rush of panic. "I'm fine, Tommy, really. Just busy with work, that's all." "Don't brush me off. You know that's not how it works. You're in deep, and it's going to catch up to you. You can't keep living this lie." "Just drop it, will you? It's my life," Jack snapped, the frustration boiling over. He didn't want to hear Tommy's warnings. He had made his choice, and he was determined to stick with it, no matter the cost. As the day wore on, Jack couldn't shake Tommy's words from his mind. He felt the walls closing in around him, the weight of his secret pressing heavily on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to lose Sarah. Not now, not ever. That night, Sarah stood in the living room, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke with Linda again. "I just can't shake this feeling that he's hiding something. It's like he's a different person," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "Maybe you should just ask him directly," Linda suggested. "You deserve to know the truth." Sarah sighed deeply, glancing toward the hallway where Jack would emerge at any moment. What if he does have something to hide? What if it's something that could change everything? "Then you'll deal with it together. You can't keep living with this uncertainty, Sarah. You need to address it." As Sarah hung up the phone, the tension in her gut grew. She glanced at the clock. It was getting late, and Jack should have been home by now. The thought of him being out late only fueled her suspicions. What was he doing? Where was he? Moments later, the door creaked open, and Jack stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "Hey," he said, his voice flat. "Hey," Sarah replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. "Long day?" he asked, taking off his shoes. "Yeah, you could say that," she replied, her heart racing. "Where were you?" "Just finishing up the project. You know how it is," Jack said, avoiding her gaze. Sarah felt a pang of frustration. "You've been working a lot of late hours lately. I'm just worried about you." "I'm fine, really," he insisted, but Sarah could see the tension in his jaw. As the minutes passed, Sarah's resolve hardened. "Jack, can we talk?" "About what?" he asked, his eyes suddenly wary. "About us. About everything that's been going on. I just need to know if there's something you're not telling me." Jack's heart raced. He had been dreading this moment, and now it was here, hanging between them like a spectre. "There's nothing going on, Sarah," he lied, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "Don't do this," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I can feel that something's off. Just tell me the truth." At that moment, Jack overheard her mention the word divorce in a hushed tone as she dialed Linda's number again. "What if he's hiding something worse? What if—" She paused, her voice trembling. "What if we need to consider separating?" Jack's heart dropped. Panic surged through him. The thought of Sarah leaving him, of everything he had built collapsing around him, was unbearable. He could lose it all, the life they had together, the love he thought they shared. He had to do something, and fast. "Sarah!" Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. "Wait, let's talk about this." But the words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Jack knew he needed to act before it was too late, before his secret could shatter their lives forever. Jack Thompson sat at the small table in his dimly lit kitchen, the sun setting outside, casting long shadows across the room. The weight of the lottery win pressed heavily on his chest, suffocating him in its grip. The remnants of his previous life as a humble construction worker seemed to linger in the air, taunting him. He had come so far, yet felt so trapped. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly time for Sarah to come home. Anxious energy coursed through him as he contemplated his next move. "Jack, is everything all right?" he muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. He had been asking himself that question more often lately, and the answer always felt like a dark cloud looming over him. As the minutes ticked away, he felt the urgency of his situation mount. He had to find a way to keep his fortune hidden, to secure his newfound wealth from the impending divorce, a thought that sent shivers down his spine. He reached for his phone and opened his banking app, staring at the amount displayed on the screen. The numbers danced before his eyes, a dizzying reminder of what he had won and what he stood to lose. "I need to create a secret account," he murmured, a plan forming in his mind. It was risky, but necessary. He couldn't let Sarah take half of what he had worked so hard to conceal. With a deep breath, he stood up and grabbed his jacket, the fabric brushing against his fingertips as he made his way to the door. The chill of the evening air hit him like a slap as he stepped outside, his heart pounding with the adrenaline of deceit. He drove to a nearby bank, the neon sign buzzing overhead, a beacon of his hidden intentions. Inside, he kept his head down, hoping to blend into the background. The teller, a young woman with bright red lipstick and a warm smile, greeted him. "How can I help you today?" she asked, her voice friendly but professional. I'd like to open a savings account, please," Jack replied, his voice shaky. He glanced around, ensuring no one was listening. "Sure. Do you have identification with you?" she asked, her fingers already ready to type on the computer. Jack nodded, fumbling with his wallet before producing his driver's license. As she processed his request, Jack's mind raced with thoughts of the money he would soon hide. "This is just a temporary measure," he reassured himself. "Just until things settle down." "Here you go," the teller said, handing him a small card. "You're all set. You can deposit any time." "Thanks," he muttered, taking the card like it was a fragile piece of glass. He stepped out of the bank, the night air wrapping around him like a shroud. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to the turmoil in his heart. Back at home, Jack found Sarah in the living room, her brow furrowed as she scrolled through her phone. She looked up as he entered, her expression shifting from concentration to concern. "Hey, you're home late. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just got caught up with some stuff at work," he lied, his heart racing as he tried to maintain a calm facade. "Work? Or is it just you keeping more secrets?" she challenged, her tone teasing yet edged with tension. Jack felt the heat rise in his cheeks. "No secrets here, Sarah. Just trying to keep things rolling," he replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Right." She crossed her arms, her gaze piercing. "You've been acting strange lately. I know something's bothering you. Just tell me." Jack swallowed hard, the walls closing in on him. "It's just stress, babe. You know how it is," he deflected, wishing he could find the courage to confess. "Stress? Or is it something else?" "You can talk to me, Jack," she pressed, her voice softening. "Really, I'm fine," he insisted, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. He needed to change the subject to steer the conversation away from the precarious ground they were treading. "What's for dinner?" he asked, attempting to lighten the mood. "Just some pasta. I figured we could have a quiet night," she said, but Jack could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. "Sounds great," he replied, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. They moved into the kitchen together, but the air felt thick with unspoken words. Later that evening, as they sat across from each other at the dining table, the silence was deafening. Jack pushed his food around his plate, unable to eat as thoughts of his secret gnawed at him. Sarah, on the other hand, picked at her meal, her expression distant. "Jack," she began, breaking the quiet, "if you're hiding something from me, I need to know. I can't keep living like this, feeling like I'm in the dark." He looked up, caught off guard by her intensity. "You're not in the dark, Sarah. We're fine," he lied again, but the words felt hollow. "Are we?" she challenged, her eyes flashing with emotion. "Because it feels like there's a wall between us, and I don't know how to break it down. If you don't tell me what's going on, I swear—" "Swear what?" Jack interrupted, his voice rising. "That you'll leave? Is that what you want?" "Jack, this isn't just about me," she shouted, frustration evident in her tone. "We're married. We're supposed to share everything. If you can't do that, I don't know how much longer I can stay." Her words pierced him like daggers. Panic surged within him, and he clenched his fists under the table, fighting the urge to reveal everything. "You don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm trying to protect us." "Protect us? Or protect yourself?" Sarah shot back, her voice trembling. "What are you so afraid of? Just tell me." Jack's heart raced as he weighed his options. The truth loomed over him like a storm cloud, threatening to unleash chaos in his carefully constructed world. But fear and greed held him in a vice grip, and he couldn't let go. "I can't," he finally admitted, his voice breaking. "I just can't." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, the hurt evident on her face. Jack felt his heart crack as he watched her struggle with the realization that their marriage was unraveling. As the night wore on, Jack lay in bed beside Sarah, his mind racing. He turned to her, the moonlight casting a gentle glow on her face. She was beautiful and vulnerable, and the weight of his lies felt heavier than ever. Maybe I should just tell her, he thought, but the fear of losing everything held him captive. Instead, Jack closed his eyes, turning away from her. He couldn't face the truth, not yet. He had made his decision. He would go through with the divorce. The thought of Sarah uncovering his secret was too great a risk, and the illusion of his perfect life was all he had left. In the shadows of that night, he made a silent vow to keep his fortune safe, even if it meant tearing apart the very fabric of their life together. Little did he know, the truth had a way of surfacing, and soon the consequences of his choices would force him into a reckoning he never saw coming. Jack Thompson stepped into the courthouse, his heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and relief. Today marked the end of his marriage to Sarah, a relationship that had been strained under the weight of his secrets. He walked through the double doors of the courtroom, his head held high, determined to keep his composure. The smell of polished wood and the faint echo of whispered conversations filled the air, but all he could focus on was the finality of the day ahead. "Jack!" A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. It was Tommy Reed, his best friend, who had been his confidant through this tumultuous time. "You ready for this?" Jack forced a smile, the tension in his shoulders relaxing slightly. "As ready as I'll ever be. Just want to get this over with." Tommy studied him with concern. "You sure you don't want to talk about—" "No," Jack interrupted sharply, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. "I'm done talking. Today it's just business." "All right, man. Just remember, this isn't the end of the world," Tommy said, his tone gentle but firm. "You need to think about what happens next." Jack nodded, but his mind was already racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The lottery win had changed everything, and while he had built a lavish lifestyle in secret, he was terrified of losing it all if Sarah discovered the truth. He had to maintain his poker face. There was too much at stake. As they walked toward the judge's chambers, Jack caught sight of Sarah sitting alone at a table, her eyes fixed on the floor. She looked different today, older somehow, as if the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. There was a time when her laughter filled their home, a time when they dreamed together about the future. But now that future felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the lies and deceit that had crept into their lives. "Jack," Tommy said softly, nudging him. "You should talk to her." Jack hesitated. "What's there to say? We're finalizing the divorce." "Closure is important," Tommy insisted. "If you don't say anything now, you might regret it." With a reluctant sigh, Jack approached Sarah. "Hey," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. She looked up, her expression a mix of sadness and resolve. "Hey." I hope you're okay," he stammered, awkwardly shoving his hands into his pockets. "Do I look okay?" Sarah shot back, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is hard for me, Jack." "I know. It's hard for me, too." They stood in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. Jack felt the urge to reach out, to comfort her, but he couldn't risk it. There was too much riding on maintaining his secret. "We'll be done soon," he said finally, trying to sound reassuring. "Yeah, I guess," she replied, her gaze drifting away. "I just wish things had turned out differently." "Me too," Jack admitted, his heart aching at the thought of what they were losing. But in the back of his mind, the fear of exposure loomed larger than any sense of remorse. The courtroom doors swung open and the judge entered, signaling the start of the proceedings. Jack and Sarah took their seats, each accompanied by their respective lawyers. The judge cleared her throat, glancing over the paperwork in front of her. "Let's begin. Are both parties ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah's lawyer responded, and Jack nodded in agreement, his throat dry. As the judge began to review the legal documents, Jack's heart raced. The weight of his secret pressed down on him, the fear of discovery lurking just beneath the surface. He stole a glance at Sarah, who was fidgeting with her hands, her expression unreadable. "Before we finalize the divorce, I have something to say," Sarah suddenly announced, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. Jack's stomach dropped. "What?" he managed to croak out, fear gripping him. "I've been working on a financial investment of my own," she declared, pulling a crisp document from her briefcase. "I didn't want to bring it up until now, but it's significant. It could change everything." "What do you mean?" Jack asked, his mind racing. He had never anticipated this twist. Sarah held the document up. "I've invested in a startup that's about to take off. I didn't want you to think I was hiding it from you, but I didn't want to discuss it until we were done here." The judge raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of investment are we talking about?" "It's a technology company," Sarah replied, her voice gaining strength. "If it goes public, I could be looking at a substantial payout." Jack felt the ground shift beneath him. "How much?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Potentially millions," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "I could have walked away with half of everything we've built together, and I didn't want to use it as leverage. But now, with the divorce..." Her voice trailed off, the implications hanging heavily in the air. Jack's mind raced. His carefully constructed life was crumbling around him. "You could have told me," he said, struggling to find his footing in this new reality. "I didn't want to hurt you," she replied, her voice steady. "But now, I don't know what's real anymore." Before Jack could respond, a figure stood up from the back of the courtroom, drawing everyone's attention. "Excuse me," the stranger said, his voice booming. "I have information regarding the lottery ticket that could change everything." Jack's heart sank. The man was tall, with a rugged appearance and an air of authority that demanded attention. Jack's mind raced, panic coursing through him. Who was this man? How did he know about the lottery ticket? The judge frowned, her gavel poised in the air. "Sir, you cannot interrupt these proceedings without proper authorization. Please state your business." "I have evidence that could implicate Mr. Thompson in a serious matter related to the lottery winnings," the man continued, his gaze fixed on Jack, a knowing look in his eyes. Jack's world tilted on its axis. He could feel his breath quickening, the walls of the courtroom closing in around him. What information could this man possibly have? Had someone discovered his secret? "Your Honor," Jack said, his voice shaky but determined, "I need to know what he's talking about. I don't want any more lies." The mysterious stranger stepped forward, undeterred by the judge's stern warning. "It's not just about the ticket. It's about who he bought it from. I have proof that could expose everything." Jack's heart raced as he glanced at Sarah, who appeared equally stunned. The reality of the situation crashed down upon him, the weight of his lies threatening to bury him alive. "Your Honor," Jack said, desperation rising within him. "I can explain. Just give me a moment." But the judge's gavel struck down firmly. "Order in the court! We will take a recess until this matter can be properly addressed. Mr. Thompson, you will remain here." As the courtroom erupted in chaos, Jack felt the blood drain from his face. The life he had built on secrets was unraveling right before his eyes, and there was no escape. The stakes had never been higher, and he was left standing on the precipice of disaster with the truth ready to consume him whole.